Hi there, my name is Paola Gaudio and I'm aggregate professor of English language and translation at the University of Bari, Italy. I contributed to Prismatic Jane Eyre with two essays and two interactive visualizations of prismatic translations, which you can find on the project's website. In this short video, I outline the gist of my essay entitled "Who Cares What Shape the Red Room Is?" or on the perfectibility of the source text. In comparing Charlotte Bronte's manuscript with 24 English editions and 12 Italian translations of Jane Eyre, I was able to identify patterns of discrepancies. Some textual variations of the original manuscript appear in most English editions, including prestigious ones such as Penguin, Collins, Clarendon Press, Norton Critical, and others, spanning from the late 19th century editions to the current ebooks available online. By studying such discrepancies, I was able not only to shed light on the original text, but I also managed to identify systematic errors in the translations. Now, if you have read Jane Eyre, I'm sure you remember the terrifying Red Room episode in which little Jane is locked as punishment for hitting her cousin John Reed. Your impression of the Red Room, however, might change depending on which edition of the novel you actually read. The title of my essay, "Who Cares What Shape the Red Room Is?" is a kind of tongue-in-cheek, provocative title which refers to an inconsistency I noticed more than 20 years ago between a Penguin edition and the digitized Gutenberg edition. In the Gutenberg edition, the Red Room, instead of being a spare chamber, therefore seldom used, therefore haunted, unexpectedly becomes a square chamber with reference to its shape. Switching from spare to square clearly affects the experience of the text, and it inevitably reflects also on the translations into whatever language. Since then, more translations came out, and more recently, I noticed that the phrase spare chamber was being replaced by a square chamber over and over again. If the adjective spare is a key to describing an uninhabited room haunted by Jane's late uncle, its substitute square provides information only about the shape of the room, something not quite relevant, hence the title, "Who Cares?" Starting with this discrepancy, my research addresses an assumption that is often taken for granted, and that is the assumption that there is just one original and undisputed source text on which subsequent translations are based. The truth is that there may be several source texts or several variations of the same source text, and it is essential that both translators and readers should be aware of this, as variations in the source text reflect on all translations in any language. But let's see in more detail some of my findings. Since the replacement of a spare with a square is outstanding, I had a closer look at other occurrences of the word square and its derivatives, squared and squareness. I found how square is consistently used by Charlotte Brontë with reference to hard-edged characters such as Rochester, Bertha, St. John, and Eliza. Its use throughout the novel is quite consistent and can be considered as a fil rouge in character depiction. As to source text variations, there are quite a few, not always as significant as is the case with obvious typos. Instead, I focused on malapropisms, that is, lexical changes that have a hilarious effect. I also analyzed variations that, one way or another, affect the meaning of the text, sometimes remarkably. Such is the omission of a whole clause at the end of chapter 2, when Jane says, I uttered a wild, involuntary cry. We are in the Red Room again, and it is precisely Jane's screaming that attracts Bessie and Abbott's attention, making them run to check in on her. Without this clause, Abbott's immediate reaction, what a dreadful noise, would not make sense. And yet, there is no trace of Jane's wild cry in several UK and US editions, as well as in most Italian translations. Going back to malapropisms, an example can be found in chapter 4 when John Reed gaily runs away from Jane, tittering execrations instead of the more disquieting uttering execrations. The irony in replacing uttering with tittering is self-evident. Another malapropism refers to St. John, who, in a subtle simile, is compared to a dusky picture. The adjective dusky carries across the somber nature of St. John's temper. He was sitting as still as one of the dusky pictures on the walls. Ironically, in several English editions, dusky gets replaced with dusty, which is a lot less dramatic and maybe even slightly offensive. After all, no one would appreciate being compared to a dusty picture. For more malapropisms and systematic errors, check out my essay in the volume Prismatic Jane Eyre. On the project's website, you can also find an interactive prismatic visualization of the Red Room episode in several languages. Thank you for your attention and have a nice day. Bye bye.